Hey everyone, Pastor Tim here, coming to you live from the TV studios of Community of Grace Lutheran Church here in Peoria, Arizona. Used to be a worship center, and over the last 3 months it's functioned more like a TV studio, but we're glad to have you with us for our very first town hall meeting. In over 15 years of being a church, this is our first town hall meeting, our first online town hall meeting. And tonight we're going to spend some time just catching up with each other. Talk a little bit about reopening, when that might be, when that might not be, but more specifically to talk about Community of Grace and what it's going to look like to be the church together once we do get back inside our building together. I'm going to give a chance for people to kind of get caught up, so I'm going to start with a little something that's a little lighter in nature, but want to let you know that throughout our time together tonight, we'll go maybe 3-4 hours. You will have an opportunity to connect with us. So in the comments section, certainly you can say hi, you can tell us where you're watching from, you can connect with other people who are watching. But as we go through the information tonight, there may be some questions that you have, either for clarification or some ideas that you have, and you'll be able to comment those into us. And Pastor Kathleen is going to monitor that for us, and we won't probably get to every question. Or maybe we won't have any questions at all, who knows. But we will get to as many as we possibly can, and there'll be some times throughout the evening when we can look at some of your comments, some of your questions. So please feel free, if you've got questions, to get in touch with us as we do this. So as we kind of wait for people to join us, I thought I would share some things with you. One of the ways that we as human beings deal with these kinds of really heavy days is through humor. And it's one of the ways that we build resiliency, is we sort of find ways to laugh about things, even though they can be really important, even though sometimes it can be even devastating. Humor has a way of just letting us release things. And so it probably will come as no surprise to you that over the last several months, there are a number of jokes that have to do with coronavirus. And they're tastefully done. I won't say they're funny, but they're tastefully done. And because I've really become used to telling jokes to virtually no one, I'm going to share some of these COVID jokes with you. And you can laugh if you want. You can put a ha 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 in the comments or applause, or just stare at me like everybody else in the building is going to do. And there's 5 of us here in the building tonight. All right, here we go. First one. The grocery stores in France look like tornadoes hit them. All that's left is debris. Thank you. Cheese? Kathleen doesn't get it. It's a kind of cheese. Brie? Cheese? All right, next. Finland just closed its borders. You know what that means? No one will be crossing the finish line. Next. Wow, it's a tough crowd. Where do sick boats go to get healthy? The dock. Yeah, I have plans tonight. I'll probably hit the living room around 8 or 9. That was my favorite. Usually for me about 8 o'clock, we're going to bed. Why didn't the sick guy get the joke? It flew over his head. Thank you very much. What types of jokes are allowed during quarantine? Inside jokes. Thank you. If there's a baby boom 9 months from now, what will happen in 2033? There will be a whole bunch of quarantines. It's only going to get better. Last one. I ran out of toilet paper and had to start using old newspapers. Times are rough. Thank you. Oh, thank you. I got one. All right. So here's what we're going to do. This is kind of a two-parter. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about reopening, just to give you some updates on what we're thinking as a staff and leadership. And then also talk a bit about the future. What's it going to look like? Because the world has changed dramatically. So again, if you've got questions or if you've got comments or something to follow up with, you can certainly comment them in, and Pastor Kathleen is monitoring that for us. And so before we start, why don't we have a word of prayer together? Gracious God, we are so thankful that you are a God of grace, and that even though this building is virtually empty, your presence is here, your presence is with my friends watching. And I pray that tonight as we talk about important things, that we would hear your Spirit, and you would bring a sense of unity to our congregation as together we follow Jesus on the bold, daring, reckless adventure, bringing grace to a world that's been rocked. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, just let's back up a little bit, and let me just walk you through the process of how we made the decision to close our building, but we never closed church, right? We've been doing church and probably more of it since we went online. We had some big discussions the week leading up to the weekend of March 14th and 15th. And we had sent an email out to you that week to say we're still going to have worship, but these are all the precautions that we have taken to make sure that it's safe. I remember going to bed, however, Thursday night. So this would have been the 12th of March. Went to bed Thursday night, and I was just churning inside, and I thought, I think we need to close the doors. And my sister Lisa texted me right as I was falling asleep, and she said that CCV had made the decision to close their campus. And I thought, you know what? They're right. That's the right decision. And so on Friday, March 13th, I sent out an email to the staff. I said, I think we need to call it. We need to go online. And we sent an email out to you, and we got into high gear, and we canceled that service in-house and went online and have been online ever since. And we did it not because the government told us to do it. We did it because it was the right thing to do, because we exist not in a building, we exist in the presence of Jesus, and we were still able to do church together online. And thankfully, we'd already been doing some online stuff. Now, we've learned over the last 3 months that showing an online live worship service is very different than doing an online service. And so hopefully you've seen that we've been working hard to really make sure that these services serve online well. And we'll have more changes as we go along. We're learning every week how to do a better job of doing online worship. But we stopped meeting in the worship center for the health and safety of all of you, and because we didn't want to be a center that would spread it. And so this was always based on a health decision. We didn't make this decision out of fear. It was a faith decision, a faithful decision, a way for us to faithfully serve our neighbors by doing our best to contain the virus. Now, there was pressure early on for churches, not ours, thankfully, and I'm very grateful to you for that, but for a lot of churches, to start to reopen a couple months after the coronavirus hit. For some Christians, they saw it as a political or a legal right, and they demanded the right to open, and the government doesn't tell us what to do. We take a very different approach here. This isn't about politics. This is about the health and safety of people and about our responsibility to our neighbors. So once the government opened up here in Arizona, we decided that we were not going to open, that we would take our time and watch what was happening. And sure enough, it's not a surprise, the number of cases in Arizona every day has spiked dramatically. Yesterday, an additional 1,600 people contracted the illness. Now, I don't know what the numbers were for today, but they've been at 1,500 to 1,600 every day for almost the last 2 weeks. Arizona now has the distinction of being the number one hot spot in all of the country in terms of the cases going up. And of course, that means that there are going to be people who die. That means that there are going to be more people in our hospitals. And our hospitals have already said that they're concerned about having enough space. We don't want to add to that problem. That's not why we exist. And we're fortunate in that our business, quote unquote, isn't dependent on us being together. We can still do online worship. We can still do online church together, and in many ways not miss a beat. And as I said before, we've actually been more connected with you online than we've ever been before. We're doing something every evening, Monday through Friday. We have Saturday worship. Every Monday through Friday at noontime, we've had story time. I've been doing men's Bible study every week. Pastor Kathleen has been doing every week with the moms and a women's Bible study online. We've been doing things with our kids. We had a Sunday Live just a few weeks ago. We have Vacation Bible School coming up in a week or two. We're going to do our musical theater camp online. We haven't missed a beat. And in the process, what we've done is we've protected each other. But more than that, we have not been spreading this coronavirus to people around us. 2 weekends ago, I don't know what the story was this weekend, but 2 weekends ago, only 14% of all Christian churches across the country had actually opened. So you sort of get the sense every church is open but ours. That's not the case. Only 14% had opened. Now, there may have been more that opened this weekend, but I do know that our friends at Vineyard were all set. They meet on 83rd Avenue, I think, and Peoria. They were all set to open this weekend, and then they shut it down. And they said, based on the numbers here, we're not going to open, and good on them for making that decision. Because this is not the time for us to reopen our churches. It's not safe for us to reopen our churches. So not that many churches have opened, but here's what else has happened. Those that have reopened, of course, they're opening up at 10% to 25% capacity. And the overwhelming majority of churches that have opened have not even filled that small capacity. I've heard pastors over and over again say our people were pushing us to open the church. We opened the church, and then they didn't come because they don't want to get coronavirus. And because they know it's just not the same. A lot of people who have gone to their churches and been a part of these socially distanced experiences have been deeply, deeply disappointed, as have the pastors and the staff, because it's just not really church. We come to church to be able to shake hands and to say hi to each other, and of course to worship. But the reason why we come to a building is for the fellowship, and you simply cannot do that. And so even though churches have opened up, they've been extremely disappointed with the numbers of people who have come. And most people are discovering it's a whole lot better right now watching it on TV or on the phone or on an iPad than it is coming into a place with a mask on, sitting 6 feet apart from people. That's just not really worship. And so one of the things that we want to avoid, and I read a great article on this, is doing two things poorly right now. To do in-house worship and to do online worship at this time and do them both poorly. We're going to do one thing really well, and that's great worship, and we're going to do it online until it's safe to come back and worship together. So that's a little bit about what we're thinking at this point. I want to tell you this, that unlike other churches, we have not set a date officially and announced that because we didn't want to have to do like our friends at Vineyard and say, hey, we're going to open up, and oops, by the way, we're not. We have toyed with some dates here, and we've kept them internal, and we've been watching the numbers, and we're going to follow CDC guidelines. And the CDC guidelines that come directly from the White House is that you don't open up public gatherings until there have been at least 2 weeks of declining numbers. We've never had declining numbers in Arizona. Our numbers are going up, and so you can do the math. Even if it started now to go down, it's going to be at least 2 weeks before we open. So I have a sense that when we finally open, it's going to be a decision that's made as fast as when we closed. And we're going to make the decision it's safe to open, and then we're going to let you know, and then what's going to happen is we're going to put a reservation system in place because we want to make sure that we don't have that many people coming and overflow the place. But here's what you can expect if we open. You can't talk to each other. You can't stand in the lobby and socialize. We're going to get you to a seat. You're going to sit in your seat. We're probably not going to sing publicly. Some churches are, but CDC says we shouldn't. It's just not a great worship venue. But at some point, we will get back together and we'll experiment with it. But I do want to give you a little picture of what it looks like, because we have set this up for social distancing right now. And can we get a little picture of that for the fans there who are watching? And then I'm going to see if Kathleen has any questions or comments over there before we move to the next thing. Now, as you're looking at this, and I don't think they're able to really move the camera around, but I can tell you right now, Jeff and Diane have done a great job of setting this up for social distancing, and there's still too many chairs in here. And I walked in tonight and I thought, I don't want to be in a building with all these people breathing. And I know you don't want to either. So even though we've got chairs sort of set up social distance, we're going to have to take some of those out. We think we can maybe get max in here 75 to 100 people and be safe. And, you know, for us, that's kind of a Saturday night worship service. We usually average about 130. But anyway, that's kind of what it looks like. Are we back on me? Are we ready to? Okay, thank you, guys. All right, so that's kind of where we're at. We're making decisions not based on fear, but based on science, based on what's happening in Arizona, and based on our commitment to do the best worship we can and to make sure that we keep you safe and that we don't become a center for spreading it. There have been several churches already that have had worship, and someone came with COVID, and those churches had to close down, and now their communities are filled with panic because they're wondering if they're going to get it. By the way, 4 experts in virus put a little chart together, 1 through 10, 1 being low, 10 through being high risk, worship rates at number 8. And you can worship without coronavirus at your own house, and we're going to do it well. So Kathleen, you have anything for me?
No, not yet.
Oh, good. So I have been perfectly clear so far, and that's because my wife, who's the only one watching, doesn't have any questions yet.
No, we have quite a few people.
Oh, good. Thank you. Hi, Jan. All right. So let's seg now. We are going to come back to the building someday, all right? By the way, my friend Al Castle, who's over at Peace Lutheran Church, he jokingly says that their time to go back in will be Christmas 2022. We're not planning that far out, but I think it's going to be further out than we first thought, all right? But once we get back in, and even before we get back in, we as a congregation have a lot of things to think through because the world has changed dramatically. And one of the things that we know about periods of crisis like this, especially when you have this trifecta of pandemic, economic loss, and also then the things with racism going on in our country, that's crisis. And it puts every kind of change on steroids. It speeds everything up. So the things that were already in the process of slow change suddenly hyperspeed and become reality. Let me give you a couple examples. A lot of companies over the last several years have been wondering, can we really make it work for people to work at home? Question answered. The answer is yes. And here's one of the profound impacts of that. A number of companies are now asking the question, do we have to have all of these office buildings and all the expense that comes with it? My friend Al Castle was saying that he had just read an article the other day about a shift that could take place in San Francisco where all of these companies that have offices now begin to offload them, and they're predicting that potentially prices in San Francisco will start to go down. It will become more livable there because there'll be so much space opened up because of this crisis and people not working in office buildings anymore. It has accelerated change. Starbucks was built on what we call the third place model. It was created with the belief that people didn't have enough gathering places just to hang out with friends. And so Starbucks was in the business of creating these social environments, and the secondary thing they did was sell coffee. So community was the product they were selling. But they began to notice a little bit of shift taking place over the last couple of years, and they began to notice, of course, with things like Amazon, that while community is still important, convenience is even more important. And Starbucks started to experiment with getting coffee to the people rather than people coming for the coffee. Exponential change immediately. Now Starbucks is looking to redo many of their places where they sell coffee and change them into places where they can get coffee out to people because convenience has suddenly become important and people are staying home more. Change, or crisis accelerates change. So convenience has become one of the things that's really important, not just for coffee consumers, but for churchgoers as well. Churches have slowly been experimenting, like ours, with online worship. And one of the questions that we've all been asking is, can you really create community online? Can people feel connected online? The answer's been given to us. Yes. In fact, Some people, especially younger generations, are saying, you know what? This is pretty nice. I don't have to fight with my kids. I don't have to fight with my husband to get to church. I don't have to wear anything special. We can watch church anytime we want, in our pajamas, eating pizza at any time because it's convenient and we still feel connected. Does online worship work? Absolutely, it works. And it's not going to go away. There will be a lot of people who will probably now make their worship of choice online worship. That doesn't mean that they won't come to events at the church building. They may come to bring their kids to a youth event or a children's event or come to a Disney concert. But they may not be as likely to come regularly to the building for worship. We know that the worship patterns of people has dramatically changed over the last several years, where when I was a kid, your best attenders went to church 3-4 times a week. 3-4 times a month. And it's probably 3-4 times a week. But they went to worship 3 to 4 times a month. Now your best worshipers go once every 3 to 6 weeks. And yet, we've seen an uptick in people experiencing worship with us online. We don't really know what the numbers are for sure because Facebook numbers are kind of weird. But we think we've at least doubled our attendance. And in the summer months when we're at about 450 people, last weekend we were over 1,000 viewers. Because it's convenient and because you're sharing it with your friends and people from other parts of the country can watch it. So online worship isn't going anywhere. So that has profound impact for us as a church. When we're thinking through worship services and we're thinking through coming back into this building, what is that going to mean? Should we stop doing these specialized worship services where they're a bit more produced and we're doing videos and it's made for TV and just do the worship service again? Or should we do 2 different kinds of worship services on a weekend? One where it's geared for online worship and it's the TV worship service, and then one that's live. The content's the same, but the look and feel is different. We use video music for online worship that's a bit more produced. We use live music. We have to think that through as a staff, as a church. I know a number of you are going to want to come back. And so that we're not going to stop having in-house worship, but we do have some important questions to ask about where's the role of being an online church versus an in-house church. Before COVID-19, it used to be that churches augmented their in-house worship with online. There are a lot of church experts who are now saying that after COVID, it's going to be online worship that's augmented by physical presence. That's a very different way of looking at church. I wasn't trained for that. Pastor Kathleen wasn't trained for that. None of us have been here before. And I know it looks like we know exactly what we're doing. We have no idea from week to week what we're doing. We have no clue. We're just making it up as we go. We just have a really great staff who make it look great every week. We're just learning like everybody else. But I can promise you I'm doing a lot of reading. I know Pastor Kathleen is as well. This is what we do for a living. We're keeping up with the trends happening in churches. But this whole online thing is a big deal. And I'm guessing when all is said and done, we'll probably have more people who tune into this town hall than if we had a live one. Because that's the beauty of online church. And again, like I said before, we've had far more connection with you being online. And it's been really good. What we don't know always is who's not watching. And thankfully, our pastoral care team, along with Kendra and others, have been sending you emails and phone calling you. We've been trying to keep up with you as personally as we can. And if you haven't heard from us for a while, email me, tim@boldrecklessgrace.org, and let me know that for some reason we've missed you. But we've sent out emails a couple times. We're on our second pass-through with phone calls. So if you've not heard from us, let me know, because something's happened and we want to make sure we get with you. All right. So it looks like probably what's going to happen here in the future is that we're going to be doing some sort of hybrid of online and in-house stuff. So whatever it looks like, we're going to do worship online and we're going to do worship in place. There will be some Bible studies that we do that will be online. And there'll be some that we do in-house. I've been doing, some of you know that every Wednesday night I do a Bible study. And it's a lot like this right now where I'm just talking to you and I don't get any feedback really. And I'm happy to do that and people have really been enjoying it. But I find that the Zoom Bible study I do with the men is far more engaging because we can talk to each other. And in some ways our Zoom Bible studies for our men have been even better than our in-house just because we have immediacy with each other. We can all see each other and talk together. And so there are some pluses and minuses. We're still going to get back together sometime, men, but right now we do it online. So there'll be a kind of a hybrid of Bible study online, Bible study in place. There will be discipleship experiences that we do online and that we do in place. Same with kids stuff. Now, I have a hunch the best kids stuff is going to be here. The best youth stuff is going to be here. So we'll be ramping that up, and we're rethinking that. But I do know that there's a lot of really good stuff we can do online, and it's really convenient for people. And so that's kind of what we're looking at. All right, Kathleen's got her hand up.
I do have a question, and I'm not sure I couldn't get it to let me reply and seek a little more clarification, but we have a question. Why can't we eventually have a normal service that is recorded for online users?
Yes, well, that's one of the questions that we're wrestling with. We have been doing that. I shouldn't be looking at you, I'm looking at you. We have been doing, up until COVID-19, we had been live streaming our 10:15 service. The problem with live streaming a worship service is that it's not built for TV. It's not built for iPads and phones. And it's a very unique issue that we're working with. So what I don't want you to hear is that we will not be doing ever again in-house worship. We're going to do in-house worship. What I'm saying is we're going to be doing both. And at this point, we haven't made any decisions. At this point, we think that online worship needs to look different because it's for a different venue. Now, it could very well be that we will just go back to doing our worship service and putting it online. We may end up doing that. We don't know yet. That's why we're doing a town hall. We're throwing out ideas. This is a new world, and we're throwing spaghetti on the wall, and we're going to see what sticks and what slides down the wall and what garbage there's left to pick up. That's all we're doing. All right? I hope that answers your question. If not, you can put it into Kathleen. Yeah.
Okay, and then if you could maybe speak a little bit to Christmas show, Disney show.
The Disney show has been canceled. There's no way that we can have a cast of 60-some people up here in this close vicinity and keep them socially distanced. There's no way that we can have 500 people in here at one time. That's not even allowed at this point, and it's just not healthy for us to do. We have no idea for Christmas. We really just don't know. We're hoping we're going to do Christmas services, but we were hoping we were going to do Easter too. But we're not going to do anything unless it's safe to do so. So I can't give a definitive answer for that. What I can tell you is the Disney show has been canceled because we just cannot follow any CDC guidelines in terms of singing, in terms of people in here. If we did a Disney show, we could maybe have 4 people up on stage and 100 people out in the audience, and then we would pass it. But that's not the Disney show, so we will not be doing that. Is that any more questions?
Who cuts your hair?
Who cuts my hair? Thank you. My wife cuts my hair. And so I bought myself a little thingy, and she cuts my hair, and tomorrow I'm really excited because she's giving me another haircut, and I just bought myself a new cape. That's right. So I'm saving some money right now. I'm spending it on salmon once a week, but I am saving some money on my hair. And thank you for noticing how well it's done. Jan, kudos. All right? Any more deep questions? Great, folks. These are great questions. And again, let me just say, I'm just talking out loud here. We don't know. We're just throwing out ideas. That's why we're doing this town hall, so that you have a chance to sort of hear what we're thinking. I'm going to give you an opportunity at the end of this to throw in your ideas or have more comments for us, all right? Now, when we do reopen, so let's talk about that. Again, nothing is set in stone. We don't know. But when we reopen, it's going to be slow. We're going to follow CDC guidelines. We're going to keep our online worship, obviously. And it could very well be that to open, we're going to do like a lot of churches. What a lot of churches have done when they've opened is gone to just one service. Because what we're finding is basically 70% of churchgoers don't want to come back into the building. The other 30% say they want to come back, and maybe 10% of that 30% actually will come. That's just what the statistics are telling us right now all across the country. So when we do reopen, we will probably open with one worship service on a Sunday morning. We'll do Saturday night service online and then do a Sunday morning service. That's what we think. All right? So the big question that we're wrestling with is this. If it is true that increasingly people are going to be engaged by online worship, especially younger generations, and if it is true that for many people, the convenience of online worship will be their worship service, what is it that would get people to actually come to a building for worship? What is it that you can't get online that you can only get in the worship facility? And when we come back, what should worship look like? So that leads to a bigger question, at least for me, or bigger questions. What does it look like to be community of grace in a COVID-19 and a post-COVID-19 world? What does it look like to follow Jesus in a world that has been rocked by a pandemic, where we have lived in isolation and fear for months and months, where our economy has taken a hit? What does it look like to be followers of Jesus in this new world that's become racially aware of what's happening and the different things that are built into the systems of our country that we need to deconstruct so that there is liberty and justice for all? What does it mean to live in this new world where everything has changed? When COVID first started, we thought, well, we're going to be, 2-3 weeks. So we thought, okay, we've got a couple weeks, and then we were hoping we were going to be here for our big 15th anniversary. That didn't work. Then we thought, well, maybe we'll be here for Easter. That didn't work. And here we are now. And, hoping we'll be here for Christmas. But as we were moving into that first month of COVID, it just kept hitting me over and over again. This is a very different world. And what it was creating in me, and now especially with all of these discussions about racism, what it's created in me is a new sense of urgency to really be a community of grace. And that means to up our game. And I don't know quite what that means. Again, remember, I'm just talking out loud here. I'm throwing out thoughts. I've written them down, but I'm just throwing out thoughts. But I think we need to up our game in worship. I think we need to up our game in terms of Bible study and discipleship. And I think we need to up our game when it comes to doing mission together. Because this world, once we get back together, is going to be very broken. And this world is going to be asking questions differently than it did before March. And how are we going to respond? How are we going to talk about Jesus and a loving, caring God in a world that is so broken? And how are we going to grow in our faith so that we have the chutzpah to be missionaries of grace to the world around us? So I have this sense that we need to up our game. And again, I don't quite know what that looks like, but let me at least throw out some things. Again, I want to say I'm thinking out loud. Nothing's in stone. One of the things that we have talked about as a staff, and we've just thrown it out as an idea, we have not done any deep dive on it at all. But as you know, we have essentially for online worship, we try to stick to about 30 to 40 minutes. And part of that is because as I'm watching the service, this is me watching my own service, after about 30, 40 minutes, I'm checked out because I'm watching TV. But I think we've also found something in the way that we're doing that worship service in terms of really focusing on what matters. And so one of the thoughts that we've had is, what if we did, once we're back together, What if we did something like a 30-30 worship service, where the first 30 minutes we're all together, it's multi-generational worship, has everything, singing, communion, sermon, offering, kids' time, all of which we're doing right now in about 30 minutes. And then the second 30 minutes, we send the kids off and the youth off to their own age-appropriate times to be discipled in what it means to follow Jesus. And we adults stay in here, and we do a little bit more singing together, and then we go deeper into the sermon and really up our game in terms of how we understand scriptures and what it means to live out the gospel together. What if we did a 30-30 worship experience? That's one idea that we've had. Or we may just go back to what we used to do, but I don't know that we will. I think something's got to change. And I'm hoping that all of us who call this church our church will say, yeah, this world is different, and I want to be a part of a community that really wants to deepen faith so that we can take that grace to people around us. I think we need to up our game when it comes to discipleship. Now, we're doing some really good stuff. We've got, of course, the women's Bible study, which has been fantastic, and the moms group that's been meeting weekly and normally once a month. My men's Bible study, we've been walking through the parables together and just doing Bible study. We do some really good stuff. But as I'm thinking through life and some of the questions that come, one of the things I'm starting to work on now is a thing called a Thinking Person's Guide to Faith. And let's wrestle with deep questions of faith. There are some people, for example, who've given up on faith because science disproves Christianity. Well, is that true? And how do we know? There are some people who've given up on Christianity because how can a loving God possibly allow all this to happen? Well, does that mean we give up our faith, or is there a way to go deeper in our faith with that? I want us to wrestle with those questions and be prepared to go back into the world with those. I think that we need to take racism seriously. And I don't know how we're going to do that yet, but I do think we need to talk about it together and have a common vision together of what it means for us as a predominantly white church to stand together with our African American friends and people of color. And to be more intentional about that and maybe ask some difficult questions. Are there some things that we're doing internally that might not be welcoming to people of color? Maybe not, but I think we got to look at that. That's what Christians should be doing right now. Certainly we want to continue to find ways to help our kids grow in their faith, and Brita and Kathleen and their team are every week they're meeting on that. How are we going to do that? How are we going to help our kids really connect with Jesus so that when they move into college, their faith isn't busted by teachers who stand up and say science disproves Christianity. But kids are armed with the knowledge they need to stay faithful to the one who's faithful to them. I think we need to create more resources to help families do faith at home. That's the primary place where it's going to happen. And I do hope that some of the habits that we've created of doing, I don't know if we'll always do nightly prayer time, maybe we will, but at least keep some kind of rhythm together online so that we're connected and praying together. In terms of mission, we do a lot of really good things for mission. 4 times a year we take an offering, and that special offering goes to various causes. We've been doing some really good work with our partners in Rwanda. We've been doing some really good work with our friends over at Lake Pleasant Mobile Home Park Estate. We've been doing some great work with Feed My Starving Children. But one of the things that challenges me is that most of us who call this our church home do mission primarily by giving money. And that's really good, but I don't think that's really the kind of church we want to be. I'd like us to be a church where every single person who calls this their church home knows what their mission is. And part of that comes in seeing that our job is our mission and being Jesus at the workplace. And we as your staff need to help do a better job of equipping you for that. That's part of why I see going to a 30-30 worship experience where we can talk about that stuff the second half of worship. We may or may not do it. We might, but then we might not. We don't know. When we started this church, we had one goal. We had one prayer. Jesus will follow you wherever you lead us. And we've been doing that. And it's taken us on this wild ride, and this is the wildest of the wild rides so far. we also have this wonderful asset called a building. It has been sitting pretty much empty, and it has to sit empty during COVID. But it also sits pretty empty throughout the week. And how might this building become a place where mission can happen, not just through worship or Bible study, but are there other organizations that might find this space useful during the week for them to carry out their mission? Are there new missions that we can create together where this building can be used to house maybe something for Alcoholics Anonymous, or to house a place where people can pick up food once in a while? Whatever the idea is, we've got this great asset. How can we be more intentional about making this a gift to the community so that people can use this building and the grace of God can emanate from this place? Can it be a place for tutoring during the week? All those things are questions that we've been asking. So these are the things that we have been wrestling with. These are the questions that we're asking. And really the purpose of the town hall today was to invite you into those questions and to say, these are some things we're thinking. We may be on base, we may be off base, but this is a chance for us to pray about that together. All right, Kathleen, let me have it.
Okay, I have a few different questions here. Is our church doing okay financially being online?
All right, so thank you for that question. Thank you very, very much. So I'm going to be really hesitant in answering this because sometimes over the years when I've said we're doing okay financially, our offerings drop. So I'm going to tell you we're doing okay, but please don't let the offerings drop. All right? We are doing fine. Now let me tell you why we're doing fine. First of all, Jeff did some work with Thrivent, and they own the mortgage on this place, and they have graciously allowed us to do interest-only payments for 6 months. And that's a savings of how much, Jeff? About $12,000 a month we're saving because we're not paying principal. And part of that has to do with your faithfulness, because we just paid off our recording studio. And they have seen the way that, and we've paid off over $1 million of our principal so far over the last 10 years. So because of your faithfulness, we are now saving $12,000 a month because we don't have to pay principal. So we're saving money there. We're certainly saving some money because we're not air cooling this place for the summer. We're not doing Disney show rehearsals. We're not doing Vacation Bible School. We're not doing all those things that take money and staff to clean and so on and so forth. So we're saving money there. So that's part of why we're doing okay, and because staff is really watching their dollars. And we're also doing okay because the offerings have not dropped significantly. In fact, when the COVID first hit, we were doing very, very well. And now we're doing about what we do normally in the summer months. So I want to say good on you. And it's because of your giving we're still being able to do these things. But please, please, don't follow patterns and say, oh, Tim says we're fine, we can take a couple weeks off from our tithing. No. Every week we need that offering. And so thank you. We're doing well.
Okay, next question. Are the youth groups potentially going to be limited in size?
Well, right now, Josh has been doing his youth group online with Zoom, and then they have been meeting in socially distanced places, mainly outside. And so that's going to have to be the model that we use for a while. And Josh has been very, very good about staying connected to the kids. The kids have been staying connected with each other. In August, our sixth graders will move into our youth program, and Josh will have more information about that. But at this point, yes, our kids have to stay socially distanced as well, and that's for everyone's safety.
How are our friends in Rwanda handling this pandemic?
Yes, thank you for asking that. We just heard from Muzi Gura, who is the pastor of Nyamata Lutheran Church. That's our main partner church. And early on, they were doing okay, and I think still they're doing okay. But the last I heard was that the whole continent of Africa, I haven't heard specifically about Rwanda, but the whole continent is beginning to see some increases. And I know they're nervous about it there in Rwanda. But so far, and this was a few weeks ago, we weren't hearing anything really concerning, but certainly it's there. And again, this virus is going to do what it does, regardless of what we think about it. And so we all need to be safe, but we want to continue to pray for our friends there. That's a very good question.
And that's it as far as questions right now. Just a few folks are putting up some good ideas for us.
Good. So I think Diane has a slide for you as well. So if you want to connect with me, this will go directly to my email, ideas@boldrecklessgrace.org. Ideas@boldrecklessgrace.org. Send them all. Everything is up for grabs right now. It is a new day. And even though it's a little bit, I don't want to use the word frightening, intimidating, to walk into these days and essentially follow Jesus when we have no idea where we're going, there is something exhilarating about it. I have some of that same feeling we had when we first started this church. And, 2 weeks, 3 weeks before we opened our doors, we didn't have a place to worship, and we didn't know where the money was going to come from. We had that much money. And yet here we are, and we have this nice empty building. We're doing worship online, and Jesus has led us every step of the way. It's going to be a new church. And I'm excited to see where we end up going. So any ideas that you have, boldrecklessgrace.org. And by the way, if you send us an idea and we never use it, it wasn't because it was a bad idea. Believe me, our staff come up with a lot of ideas we never use. There's never been an idea I've had, I don't think, that we didn't use. But there have been some staff ideas that we haven't used. And there have been a lot of good staff ideas that the staff bring to staff meetings, and then I eventually claim it as my own. That's kind of how it works. So, but again, every idea is great right now, right? So please send them in. And I do want to say something pastorally as we end here. These are days where everything has been politicized. Everything. The pandemic is a political issue. Racism is a political issue. The economy is a political issue, when these are really deeply human issues. Deeply human issues. And all of these issues have different perspectives, but we need to listen to all of them rather than fight each other. And I know that one of the things that has really challenged us here in America has been all of the seemingly changing information about the pandemic. And I hope what we as Christians will do, let me narrow it. I hope that what we as Community of Grace Christians will do is we'll recognize that this is a pandemic that is only 3 or 4 months old. We don't know anything about it, and we're going to learn new things about it all the time. These are not scientists who are trying to throw us off. They don't have a political agenda. They want to keep you safe. And so some information that seemed to be valid at one point and isn't anymore, it's just because we know more about it. But there are some things that we know about this pandemic. We know it's not going away. We know that only 5% of us have been infected by it so far. And pandemics like this generally have to have a 70 to 80% infection rate or vaccine, so we have a long way to go. And we know that it is spread this way, through people talking, through people breathing, through people singing. That's the way it's spread. That information has never changed. All right? So let me put some context here, say something pastoral, maybe offend some of you, but I hope you'll understand, if I do offend you, it's for a good cause. All right? So Jan, don't be offended. In 251 AD, the Christian movement was still fairly new. All right? So that's 200 some years after the death and resurrection of Jesus. It is still seen as a weird religion in Rome. In fact, it's seen as sort of a creepy religion in Rome. The Romans cannot understand these Christians who do the things that Christians do. It was a religion that was often persecuted. And Nero, for example, we now know, started a fire in Rome, and he blamed the Christians for it. And the Christians went through several periods in Rome of persecution. But in 251 AD, some of you have heard me tell this story before, in 251 AD, a devastating plague hit Italy and northern Africa, and it lasted 14 years. At one point in Rome, 5,000 people a day were dying from that plague. The doctors and all the rich people fled the city. So there was no one left to care for those who were sick and dying, except for Christians. And Christians went out into the streets in that plague, and they risked their lives to bring the grace of Jesus to people who were suffering and people who were dying. And many Christians lost their lives in that process. The result was that people began to look at Christians through a different lens. And they began to ask themselves questions. Why would people sacrifice their lives for complete strangers? What is it about their Jesus that they know that we don't know? And it was 100 years later that this once persecuted, reviled religion became the official religion of the Roman Empire. Because Christians were willing to put their lives on the line for the sake of those who are sick. We're in a pandemic now. And in this case, we as Christians, the way that we serve our community is not by going out and helping the sick necessarily. We now have doctors and nurses who are putting their lives on the line for us to do that. But the way that we serve and the way that we show people what Jesus is like is to make sure that we do everything we possibly can to slow the spread and to protect other people from the spread. That's why we're not worshiping in building right now, for the sake of our neighbors, so that something where we come together and somebody is sick and then we go home and we don't know they were sick and suddenly we start spreading it, that's not what we want people to know about Jesus. We want to be people who are known for doing what we can to protect others. And that's why I want to say something about wearing masks. And here people are going to think I'm being political. I'm not. I'm being pastoral. We know now from the latest research that masks help slow the spread of this disease because it is spread this way, and it stops it from going too far. And when we can't socially distance or when we're in buildings, the mask is one of the ways that we don't protect ourselves, we protect other people. Now, there have been a lot of people, led by Christians, by the way, who say, I am not wearing a mask because it violates my right to not wear a mask. And so here's what I want to say to you pastorally. When you signed up to follow Jesus, you gave up your rights. When you signed up to follow Jesus, you made the decision that your neighbors would be more important than you are. And so, where a lot of people are refusing to wear their mask as an act of defiance, I'd like us to reposition that as members of Community of Grace and wear our masks and wear them as an act of defiance. To be able to say to people, when we go out with that mask on, I have decided that your health and well-being and your life is far more important than my right to not wear a mask. That's why we wear masks. It's not going to protect us, but it may protect somebody else. Here's what Paul says: do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility regard others as better than yourselves. Let each of you look not to your own interests, but to the interests of others. Let the same mind be in you that was in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not regard equality with God as something to be exploited, but emptied himself, taking the form of a slave, being born in human likeness, and being found in human form, he humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even death on the cross. That's who we represent. And I would be delighted if one of the things that people say about Community of Grace is those nutcases wore masks. What's wrong with them? And we don't have to say anything, but what we're doing is we're saying, you're more important than my right to not wear a mask. Your life is more important. And quite honestly, really, when we think about it, if any of us have to go out in public, don't we want other people wearing masks? If my wife has to go out in public, I don't want people breathing all over her. I don't want people breathing all over my grandkids if they have to go somewhere. So let's take the lead, and let's do something scandalous, and let's do something bold and reckless, and let's wear masks. And if people want to laugh, let them laugh. But they're not going to die because of us. We're going to give them life. You can give your donations to Community Grace Lutheran Church. And if you've got things where you disagree on that, it's Kathleen at boldrecklessgrace.org. Kathleen at boldrecklessgrace.org. All right. I've said my piece. So that's where we're at, folks. When we open, it's going to be slow. When we finally get all back together, it's going to look different. I don't know what it's going to look like, but all I can tell you is I feel in my gut we've got to up our game. And I hope you'll join me in that. And that in the months and years to come, this will be a church where people will look at us and say, those people really believe in Jesus. And there's something about their Jesus I want to know about. Let's close in prayer. Can we do that? Gracious God, thank you for this church, these people who love this church, these people who are watching in tonight and who will watch in later. And all of us have something to contribute because this is our church. And so I pray that you would open up our spirits to what you want to do through this church. And none of us know what we're doing, but you do. And so I pray that people would send in ideas. I pray that we would really think through deeply, how do we want to grow? How do we want to make a difference? And how can the church help me do that? And then I pray that we would always remember that we gave up our rights to follow you. And that we chose the right to love our neighbors and to serve them first. And give us the courage to do that as we social distance, as we wear our masks, as we choose for the sake of those we love to not worship in home, or not worship in place, but to worship at home until that day comes when we can be safe. And so now as you go, may our loving Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face smile upon you and be gracious to you. And may the Lord always turn his face toward you and give you peace. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you, everyone. We will see you tomorrow night. Have a good week. Monday night, whatever that is for you. I'll stop babbling now. Tell me when we're done.